Imagine standing on a sun-warmed shore and taking one step, and under your feet, not sand, but the carved threshold of a door that thousands once passed through. Imagine a market square, frozen in the hush of foam, houses and temples beneath a cold, blue roof, their stories muffled by centuries of salt. Some cities sank slowly, swallowed by creeping tides. Others vanished in a single night, swallowed by earthquakes, tsunamis, or the sudden collapse of the ground itself. Tonight, we dive into true stories of civilizations swallowed by the sea, not the ones you've seen in every documentary, but the quieter, stranger places that history almost forgot. Stay with me until the end. The last city I'll show you is older than the pyramids. That may change how you picture the word lost. This is Singularity's Animations, where we breathe life into the forgotten past. If you care about the people behind the ruins, if you want to feel the hum of lives once lived and hear their quiet echoes, subscribe and join us. Together, we keep these memories from being swallowed a second time. In the shadow of the Corinthian Gulf, once stood Helike, a prosperous Greek city with temples, markets, and a harbor lined with ships. A catastrophe struck. An earthquake, followed by a sudden subsidence, and the city collapsed into the marshy ground. The sea rushed in. Ancient writers record the shock. Temples toppled, people buried in the plaza, survivors scattered. For centuries, Helike lived on as a whispered legend, a moral fable about hubris and the god's wrath. Until archaeologists, guided by ancient accounts and modern geology, began to pick apart the coastline. What makes Helike haunting is how sudden it was, unlike places that fade beneath gradual seep. Helike's end was violent and immediate. The earth liquefied beneath the city, and within hours entire neighborhoods were gone. For the families who did not escape, there was no time to mourn. Lives ended mid-gesture, offerings left on altars, pottery still warm from hands. The city's disappearance fed myth, and later, a kind of scientific curiosity. Divers and geophysicists found layers of peat and sea silt where streets once were, and ceramic shards that matched accounts written by Plato esse contemporanea. Helike's story matters because it reminds us that the sea doesn't always creep. Sometimes it explodes into history, claiming whole communities in a single, shattering moment. The waves did not merely erase stone, they erased lives, rituals, everyday human textures we rarely imagine when we talk about ancient ruins. When we unearth helix fragments, we unearth people. Far across the Pacific, in the lagoon of Poompuhar, stand a staggering series of man-made islets, basalt walls rising out of the water like a black coral city. Nan Madol, sometimes called the Venice of the Pacific, is not a single island, but a labyrinth of nearly 100 artificial islets, linked by narrow channels, built with huge columnar basalt blocks. Its scale shocks modern builders. How did people move and set such heavy stones without wheeled vehicles and without modern cranes? Nan Madol's heart was political and ceremonial. Palaces, tombs, and platforms elevated above the water. For centuries, it was the seat of the Sodler dynasty, a ruling power whose stories gather mythic overtones. Then, as with so many extraordinary polities, rule grew brittle. Oral histories and later colonial accounts speak of tyranny, of leaders removed, and of a slow abandonment. The lagoon took the empty stones. Storms and wave action reclaimed the edges, and the city slipped into half-memory. What makes Nan Madol unsettling is the precision of its construction and the silence around its decline. This was a masterwork of human organization, logistics, and labor, and yet its people left no towering written chronicle to explain themselves. Modern researchers walk along mossy basalt walls and sense both the achievement and the mystery. Nan Madol is a different kind of swallowed by the sea, a spectacular architectural center that faded under the weight of politics, time, and the relentless grinding of the waves. To the Romand Baiae was a playground, a coastal strip of villas, spas, and pleasures, where senators built marble retreats and poets composed with their feet in warm water. But under the Bay of Naples, beneath that seductive Mediterranean surface, lie streets, columns, frescoed rooms, a submerged Roman landscape. The culprit here was not a single tsunami, but the restless earth itself. The region around Vesuvius and the Phlegrean fields experiences bradyseism, slow uplift and subsidence caused by volcanic activity. Over centuries, parts of Baiae sank. Luxurious villas tilted and then sat half underwater, their mosaics preserved in a strange, underwater museum. Baiae's tragedy is intimate and decadent. Comfortable lives, banquets interrupted by shudders, a culture of pleasure that could not outrun geological time. Underwater archaeologists now guide tourists through glass-bottom boats to see ruins that look like stage sets. Arches, bathing pools, even graffiti. But beneath the beauty lies a sober truth. Those ruins were once the domestic spaces of people lovers, servants, children, whose lives were defined by ordinary routines that the sea finally claimed. In Baiae, we see how proximity to natural power volcanoes, the sea, brings both abundance and risk. Deep beneath the dark waters of the Black Sea, along the continental shelf, sonar and cores have revealed traces of civilizations we barely imagined. Drowned ridges, peat layers, and the remains of shorelines that once hosted settlements. These are not Bronze Age palaces, but the quiet towns and farmsteads of prehistoric people, fishermen, herders, and small communities that built their lives on what is now the seabed. One hypothesis that captured imaginations argues that a catastrophic deluge occurred when Mediterranean waters burst through natural barriers and rapidly raised the Black Sea level several millennia ago. The idea is controversial, but the core finding that dozens of shoreline sites are now submerged is undeniable. For coastal communities, even gradual sea encroachment is catastrophic. Wells become brackish, fields turn to marsh, and trade routes shift. Archaeologists find the leftover traces, hearthstones, pottery, even the outlines of wooden structures preserved beneath layers of anoxic mud. These lost shores are powerful because they hint that the boundary between land and sea was once porous and changeable on human times. They also force us to reconsider myth. Many flood stories from different cultures, tales of great waters, of forced migrations, may be cultural memory encoded into story. Black Sea's drowned villages are quiet testaments to that ancient upheaval. Not glamorous lost capitals, but the everyday places where families lived, loved, and planted crops, now sealed beneath dark water and silt. On the southeastern coast of India lies a name from Tamil poetry, Kaferi Poompuhar, sometimes shortened to Poompuhar, a bustling port once celebrated in ancient song. Sailors, traders, and poets converged there. Temples rose to the goddess of the river. The city's marketplaces hummed with spices and cloth. Then, according to both legend and geological clues, coastlines shifted and storms, possibly tsunami events, repeatedly battered the shore. Over the centuries, sections of the city were taken by the sea. What makes Poompuhar is its place in literature. The Tamil epic Silappatikaram uses the city as a setting for both love and sorrow. When we find submerged remains off the coast, pottery, walls, and foundations, it's as if the poems are answered by the sea itself. For a culture that holds its literary past close, the loss of a port in the waves is not only an archaeological puzzle, but a rupture in a community's memory. Divers examining brickwork under the waves are also reading lines of verse in motion. Poompuhar is a reminder that Silos is not a single dramatic night. For many ancient ports, decline is episodic. A storm erodes a quay. Trade routes shift. A well becomes safe. The next generation chooses higher ground. The sea takes bit by bit, and the people adapt, remembering what they could and making new lives elsewhere. I promised you the most astonishing one, and here it is. Off the southern coast of the Peloponnese, resting in shallow Aegean blue, lies Pavlopetri, an entire Bronze Age town. Its streets, houses, tombs and courtyards mapped with uncanny clarity beneath the waves. Radiocarbon dates and ceramic typologies point to a city roughly 5,000 years old, a fully organized urban plan, from a time when many other places on Earth were still making the first steps toward towns. Pavlopetri is not a scattering of foundations. It's a planned town with a grid-like layout, streets intersecting at right angles, stone-built houses with interior rooms, courtyards, and perhaps workshops. The manner of Pavlopetri's disappearance is both ordinary and sublime. Rising sea levels and coastal subsidence, the slow adjustments of land against water over centuries, gradually drowned the town. But the sea's embrace has preserved parts of its layout, sealing organic material under fine silt and holding the town in a kind of time-slowing archive. Unlike rubble-strewn ruins, Pavlopetri reads on sonar and in careful mapping like a city plan sketched by an invisible hand. Walk imaginatively down Pavlopetri street. You might pass a merchant's stall, cross a courtyard where a family dried fish. See the low threshold of a house whose pods are long gone but whose floor plan survives. Because Pavlopetri was abandoned and submerged long ago, we have a rare kind of preservation. An intact urban snapshot from Europe's deep past. What makes Pavlopetri so electrifying is how it reframes civilization. When people think of ancient cities, their eyes often leap to stone monuments and imperial capitals. Pavlopetri is different. It is a dense, everyday town of people who coordinated construction, traded with neighbors across the sea, and organized public space. Its submergence reminds us that urban life is fragile, and that the sea can keep a city in a hush that makes it easier for us, thousands of years later, to reconstruct the rhythms of daily life. Across the globe and across time, these submerged places remind us of the same thing. People lived there. They argued over markets, loved, were betrayed, buried. Their dead grew old. The sea took their stones, their streets, their markets, but not their traces. When archaeologists pulled pottery shards from the silt or mapped the angle of a street beneath the waves, they are not just decoding ancient technology. They are listening for a whisper of ordinary life. There is a contemporary echo to it. As we watch coastlines change today, as storms become fiercer and sea levels nudge at ancient shores, these stories are not only ancient curiosities, they are warnings and consolations. They tell us that societies transform when the world's edges move, that mobility and memory are our ways to survive, and that the lives swallowed by water still have lessons to teach. If these stories moved you, if the thought of an entire town preserved under a silver surface made your skin prickle, please do one small thing. Like this video and subscribe to Singularity Animations. We tell the stories of people that textbooks forgot. Your subscription is a promise that we will keep listening to the echoes and bring them back to light. There are more sunken cities waiting, not just in textbooks, but under waves that lap where children today build. If you want the next deep dive into the technologies that let us map lost cities, or the human myths that may be memory of real floods, tell me in the comments which one you want. I'll meet you there, at the edge of the water, and we will listen.